Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I am your host, Divya Murali, a research analyst at the Institute. Bangladesh's economy is in the midst of tackling a host of macroeconomic issues, including rising prices, exchange rate volatility, and subsequent widening of its current account balance. Globally, there is an ongoing geopolitical conflict in Europe. The COVID-19 pandemic is also far from over. Additionally, Bangladesh's economy is due to undergo a structural change owing to its upcoming LDC graduation, and the country is also due for general election in 2023. In this edition of South Asia Chat, we will be talking to Dr Mohammad Masudur Rahman, visiting research fellow at ISAS, to understand how these host of internal as well as external factors facing Bangladesh affects its economy and outlook in the next few years. Welcome, Dr. Masood.
Thank you, Divya, for having me today.
To start off the conversation, let me begin with a question linking the recent budget to the existing economic issues facing the country. The budget for the fiscal 2022-23 was presented on 9 June 2022. Given the macroeconomic issues facing the country, including high inflation, exchange rate volatility, and subsequent widening of the current account balance, which typically require monetary and fiscal policy interventions to work in tandem, would you say that the budget 2023 has done sufficiently to address these issues on the fiscal front, leading the path to course correction?
Yeah, thank you, Divya. You have actually mentioned a lot of important issues, a lot of macroeconomic issues. Exchange rate volatility is important issues now. Inflation is a super hot issues now. And under this, backdrop, the finance minister declared his budget on 9th June. And it's a very ambitious budget, and he target the GDP growth rate 7.5%. But he also set up the inflation is 5.6%. In my justification, this is very inconsistent. So why this inconsistent, I explain. One is, you see, the GDP growth rate 7.5%, and this budget deficit is 5.5% of GDP. And if you see the budget expenditure, which is 36% of deficit of total budget. And among this 36%, 22% will borrow from the domestic market, and 14% are targeted from the foreign loan. So one issue is, if the government borrow money from the domestic market, that means the domestic private investment will fall, because there's less amount of money for domestic private investment. And if the government borrow money, there is other issues that central bank need to supply more money in the market. So that means the expansionary monetary policy. So when you have a expansionary monetary policy, that means the inflation increase. And sometimes when the government borrow money from the domestic market, the local investment, domestic investment decrease. So when domestic investment decrease is, set of GDP target 7.5% is difficult, is very ambitious. So there is some kinds of inconsistency with this target, GDP growth target and, inflation control target. In addition that, if you have mentioned, there's some other issues, the trade balance. The trade balance increased now to $24 billion, which was like $3 billion a few months before. So this is the reason of global market price. The finance minister, in his speech, he mentioned the fuel price increased by 65%. The urea fertilizer, which is the main, input for agricultural production, increased by 115%. Wheat price increased by 65%. Also, the Trading Corporation of Bangladesh, which is the government entity who monitor the price, the all essential product price increased, sharply. So according to this, it's actually not justified. The inflation is 5.6%. I think it could be around double digit. So in addition, if you see the the exchange rate volatility, because last 1 month Taka has been depreciated more than 10%. So which actually increase the import cost. So when increase import cost, the production cost increase, which also lead to increased inflation. So all this scenario, we can see the government target GDP growth rate 7.5% and control inflation 5.6% is a little bit inconsistent.
It was very interesting to see how closely connected all these concepts lead to. It's like a chain reaction. So continuing with this factors that actually give off the inflationary risks, a lot of economic issues faced today in Bangladesh and globally are owing to external factors, as you mentioned, like the pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has led to commodity market instability and rising inflationary pressures. The pandemic particularly led nations to come out with stimulus packages to support the economies. Bangladesh did as well. Could you deliberate on whether the stimulus packages were effective for Bangladesh and if the trade-off of economic recovery from these packages outweigh the inflationary risks associated with it?
Yeah, thank you. The government of Bangladesh actually has been implementing 28 different types of stimulus packages, which consist around 1.87 trillion BDT, Bangladesh Taka. If you convert to current exchange rate, is around $20 billion. So if you see the budget speech of the finance minister, this year 2023 fiscal year, annual development budget expenditure is around 2.5 trillion BDT. So that's mean if I calculate, which is this stimulus package is around 72% of ADB, annual development program. So this huge amount of money spending to the stimulus package, and because among this money, one of the big sector is RMG sector, ready-made garment sector, because 87% of Bangladesh export goes to the by the RMG sector. So big amount of money actually goes to the RMG sector. So a huge amount of subsidy, export subsidy, stimulus package actually we spend for this sector. My understanding is need to time to eliminate these kinds of export subsidy, because RMG sector is enough capacity to compete with the global market. And if we can reduce some of the export subsidy, like RMG sector that we have been giving more than like $5 billion every year, if you can shift this sum of money, we resource, move some of this sector to other sector, maybe more productive sector, or diverse our export or diverse our output or production, because Bangladesh export is heavily dependent on RMG sector. So export diversification is key. Otherwise it's very difficult to sustain. You see, during the pandemic, the trade balance is trade deficit is $24 billion. Because why? Because of the international price increase. So export sector is not capacity. It doesn't have that capacity to actually compete now with this import. So if we can divert some of the resource from this sector to other sector and help to increase the export, that could be useful for the economy.
That's interesting to note, Dr. Masood. Now, bringing in a social welfare angle, the pandemic pushed millions of people back into poverty, and the present price rise exacerbates the pressure on the common man. Could you speak a bit on the socio-economic issues facing Bangladeshis today and how much of an economic consequence it has on the country at large?
Yeah, you see the budget speech, the finance minister mentioned around 14 million people lost their job during the pandemic. But there is no real roadmap to how to create employment in this budget. In addition, I have seen the social safety net program. Last year, in the budget, the allocation was like 18.9% of the budget. This year, decreased to 16.7%, which is very surprising. In addition, this huge amount of foreign workers returned back to Bangladesh. because of, you see, the remittance has been decreased. So there is no talk about the employment creation of this huge amount of immigrant that's returned back to home. So social safety net program is actually not in real shape. Of course, the government increased subsidy in agriculture sector. That's fine, because when it's kinds of actually social safety net program, because when the agricultural production increase, the price is stable, the production increase, the price level in a stable price level, that low income people, they can afford, the food and other commodity. So that's good. But other area, for example, the education sector, this is also important. Is overall, important area of development. The education sector's, contribution in budget this year fall from 2% to 1.5% of GDP. So, which is very alarming. And in addition that, I always call 3F. It's called flood, fire, and ferry accident. This is a very important and common accident in Bangladesh. These kinds of socio-economic accident, push the poor people and more vulnerable. And this actually increase the poverty, vulnerability. So every year, maybe you follow last 2 weeks before the big, fire accident in Bangladesh. Many people died. The ferry accident is very common. Flash flood is very common. So the government is less concerned about these socioeconomic issues, because the government is only now focusing, the COVID control and other stimulus package for the export and other things. But these kinds of socioeconomic issues, safety net program is less, more, this less amount of money to investing this sector, and lack of governance of this sector is serious issues, which actually, have huge problem for poverty, and this kinds of big accident that destroying the income of huge number of, low income people. So it's a real concern.
Striking a balance is always the most difficult. Moving on, while Bangladesh is in the middle of tackling a host of economic issues, including simultaneously strategizing policies to prepare for the country's upcoming LDC graduation, the country is also due to face a general election in 2023. Could the unique complexity of the present economic challenges impact the upcoming elections? Your thoughts, please.
So last two elections, basically, 2014 and 2018, under this ruling party, Bangladesh Awami League, was not very inclusive and not very credible election, actually. So that's why the next year the election is very important for the inclusive, election, because this opposition party, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, they did not attend in the last two elections. So it is very important for sustainable growth, and when the investor want to see the stable economy. Otherwise, they don't want to invest. So next year will be a little bit tough for investor, actually. So, the government recently enact a law. So the Election Commissioner Act 2021 and recruit new election commissioner. But the opposition party demanding for the neutral government. Otherwise, they don't want to participate in this election process under this ruling party. So we are closely monitoring this, and is a very important, a fair and credible election for economic growth and sustainable development.
That will be an interesting political watch coming up in 2023.
Yes, right.
So to close off, I would just like to ask what would be your outlook for Bangladesh? What, in your views, are its potential opportunities and challenges, say, in the next 5 years?
I think I can see the very bright future of Bangladesh. You know why? The country is already the $5 billion of economy. It's one of the top 20 economy in the world. And huge middle class, 170 million people with huge middle class. So it's a really bright future. In addition, this, the government and Bangladesh now has a capacity of implementing many mega projects. So they're not scared of implementing MRT project or tunnel under the sea or big, next week, but the big, bridge between Dhaka and southern part, which is basically connected with the what is called, connecting with the India and other country in the region. So the very big project. So there are many diff kinds of mega project implemented by the government. So the government has capacity now to develop these kinds of nuclear plant project. So the government implementing. So the huge potential and huge, bright future actually. But I concern mostly on the lack of governance, good governance, corruption, implementation, capacity of the bureaucrat. So that is the area. And also, you see the Bangladesh going to graduate from LDC by 2026. And then most of the market, Bangladesh will lose these kinds of preferential market access. So that would be another major issues for Bangladesh. So another issue that we always talk about the export, sector, because Bangladesh is dominated by RNG sector. So export diversification is key. Otherwise, it's very difficult to sustain, its export basket. Another issue, Bangladesh is heavily dependent on remittance of foreign wage earners, and this pandemic now last 9 months, the exchange, the foreign remittance, fall sharply. So it's depend on these kinds of remittance. It's not sustained in the economy. So the domestic capacity that we need to increase. Domestic production, export diversification, good governance, that issues need to address properly.
Thank you for sharing your insights, Dr. Masood. Thank you for also taking time off to guest our program. With this, we've come to the end of South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you and have a good day.